Hi, and welcome to this video on differentiation. This video is very much focused on actual practical strategies that we can use in the classroom to differentiate for our students. So this is Differentiation 102. If you've watched Differentiation 101, I went through really the most important aspect of differentiation, which is knowing our students. And I went through how you can check your students' learning profiles and use learning analytics to really get an in-depth understanding of our students before we begin to teach them, which is really important at the beginning of semester. But in today's video, I want to look at this next aspect, which is plan our differentiated instruction and tasks within our classroom. Much of this is just good teaching practice, which I'm sure everybody is doing already, but hopefully there'll be a couple of strategies in the video today that you'll go away and think that's something I could implement for those particular students. So I remind you of the differentiation placemat that we've distributed to all staff, and you're very welcome to get another copy of this, which has got some brilliant ideas and strategies for students who are Tier 2 or Tier 3 in the NCCD, but also some great ideas for even all of our students that might enhance their learning going forward. And let me pick out a few of those specifically. We've arranged, as you can see on the placemat, it into four main areas. And the first area is process. So consider what processes you can use in the classroom that can cater better for all of your students. And some of the key ones there would be visual aids to support learning. That's things like displays around the classroom that are constantly up, or obviously just using your PowerPoint presentations to take you through some of the tasks in a really visual and clear way rather than just giving verbal instructions. I like to think of it as the I do, we do, you do model around modeling examples. And I know that's used in many classrooms already, but make sure you model examples for the students before you're getting them to complete that work themselves. And in fact, having some printed model examples or some visual model examples can also be incredibly effective. You can generate some of those model examples using AI. So ChatGPT, for example, can actually write you a year 8 style essay on a topic, and you can actually show the students that and in fact pick it apart. Say, these are the bits that work really well. Perhaps if you do this, you wouldn't do so well. And actually using AI or ChatGPT as a tool can be really, really effective, as are many other technology aims. So within process, have a think about using the immersive reader with some students, for example, and some of those technological processes will be suggested on individual students' profiles here at the college. Using some pre-teaching, especially around vocabulary, is very important. And that's that flipped classroom model where you're asking students to go off, perhaps watch a YouTube video or learn particular types of vocabulary so that when they arrive in the classroom ready for the learning, they've actually got some of that background knowledge ready to go. Think about the grouping in your classrooms. So using peer teaching can be really, really effective. So if you'll group them in particular groups that you've thought about beforehand, where different students will take on the role as a teacher, that can be an effective model. And look at timeframes. Some students might need shorter tasks. I'm thinking particularly of our students that might be diagnosed with ADHD, that chunked learning, chunked instruction, and then chunked periods of time where they're actually doing the task in short, sharp bits can be really effective. Other students might need extra time. They might need more time, more thinking time, for example, where they take a step back and have a nice long think about the task and reflect on it. Maybe they need rest breaks, and you'll see that in their special provisions in year 5 to 12 as well, where they can actually just take a break from the task, go out and grab a drink. Even though those special provisions are designed around formal assessments, they give you a clear indication of what would benefit that student in your normal classroom learning. The next segment on our placemat is content. And this is a great question for you to ask yourself around differentiation, especially as students go further up the school. Teachers can feel quite uncomfortable about differentiating content because in the back of their mind, they're thinking, well, all students need to know this. This is something that's essential for the course. But I think that process of working with your teams and asking yourself that questions, what do all students need? What should most students be able to demonstrate, and what should some students be able to demonstrate? That all can, most can, some can approach can be really helpful in making sure that you're clear as a teacher what is the most essential content that students need to understand. So go through that process and have a think about how that could be differentiated. What are the essential skills and understandings for this unit, and what are the non-essential, perhaps extension skills that you could look at? Can some students use more scaffolding to develop these skills whilst others have more agency in choosing their content, for example? So that is linking process and content together, but it might be that you've got certain students in your classroom where you're saying, I need you to do this task, and other students in their classroom where you're saying, actually, you've got a choice. You can choose whatever task you want to do within these parameters to demonstrate your learning. Can we change the content to match student contexts and interests? And this links nicely with our life-worthy learning, learning spotlight for 2024. Are we teaching content because we've always taught it? And is there a different way or different types of content that you could supplement that perhaps will capture the interest of certain students? In particular, is there a culturally responsive content that we might be able to introduce? Is there a life-worthy or practical content that we could introduce that has a strong connection to the real world, so will make students a little bit more interested going forward? Another segment on our differentiation placemat is environment. And this is linked a little bit to process because you're often using the environment to supplement your processes. And I mentioned already the visual cues and displays, those sorts of things that can be up around the room to remind students of things like key vocabulary or skills or order of writing, scaffolds, all of those sorts of things can be in your classrooms. Think about creating rooms, especially for those younger students, with those timeout spaces where students could go and take a break, or have a bit of a read, or just have a moment to themselves so they can refocus. I'm thinking especially of students that might be diagnosed with ASD, where they need that little bit of extra time and break time to be able to supplement their learning. Look at your desk arrangements. I know in year 5 and 6, we've been using L-shaped desks, which have worked very well in terms of allowing them to work in groups, but also have enough separation so that they can do individual work effectively as well. That group work aspect is something that you can play around with. You know, you can get students to move desks, you can use a bit of circle time on the floor, you can use different areas of the classroom that help to differentiate for those individual students. And we see some wonderful examples of that happening down in our junior school. So if you're in the middle school and you want to go down and have a look, please do. And the environment that helps students to connect their classroom learning to the real world could also be helpful. So displays up that show clearly we're studying this because in the real world, this is what you might need to implement. That life-worthy learning can definitely be displayed in our classroom environments. And finally, product. So how can we differentiate what we expect students to produce that still demonstrates their learning? I spoke about this in the last video a little bit, but providing a range of options of demonstrating learning could be good, but you could also ensure that you vary your assessment products throughout a term or semester. So that range of options might not just be every single assessment task. That might be a bit unmanageable. You might want to think about, ensuring that you've got this range of assessment tasks throughout a semester. In other words, not always a formal written test, because we've got to remember, what are we actually assessing? Be clear about what the key learning objectives are and focus on them. We're not always assessing the ability to do a formal written test. We're assessing their conceptual understanding, which can be demonstrated in a range of ways, including things like classroom discussions. We're assessing their specific skills in certain areas. So if we're writing a test, we don't have to assess every single skill. It can just be focused on those individual skills that we've been teaching. They are the skills that we want to see them demonstrate in those assessments. So when we're talking about the product a student is producing following their learning, think about varying that product so it clearly shows the learning objectives. It doesn't just show their ability to work in a test environment. Of course, learning enhancement is always there to support in modifying assessments, but you need to give us 2 weeks notice at least, because it does take a while and we're getting a lot of those sorts of requests. So if you do need any support or advice about how you might vary an assessment for a specific student, please reach out and let us know. Because remember, most of what we're doing already counts as great differentiation. All of those really good, Hattie's hits and those sorts of styles of teaching where we're varying instruction, those are the things that help to differentiate for our students in the classroom. Standing back and lecturing them doesn't help a lot of students, but actually using all of those brilliant pedagogical initiatives in the classroom that everybody is doing already helps to differentiate. So let's not reinvent the wheel, but if you do come up with something that's new and that's interesting, please make sure you record it on Atlas in that little differentiation box going forward, so that people teaching that subject the following year have a great record of it, have the resource, have all that information going forward. So remember, know your students. That's the primary one. And if you haven't watched my little video about that, please do so. That was released back in term 1. Plan your differentiated instructions and tasks. Hopefully today's video has given you some ideas about that, as well as modifying those assessment tasks, making sure that they're not always those formal test-like assessments, that you're actually using things like dialogic learning, classroom discussions, those sorts of interesting things to really test the skills that you've been teaching, so that students are demonstrating those skills and that conceptual understanding in a variety of ways. Thanks.